Hi, my name is Billy Lundevall, and I currently work as a lead artist at Epic Games and Quixel. I thought I would buckle down today and set the record straight about a topic that I see and hear perpetually regurgitated, commonly along with a buttload of misinformation. Namely, best practices when it comes to the metalness parameter in systems using the Disney Principle BRDF, such as Unreal Engine, Unity, or Arnold. I will use Redshift for my examples, as it can freely swap between workflows, but the principles apply to any metalness-based system. The two most common things you'll hear about this subject are:
Oh, well, you can only use black and white and nothing in between.
Or
Gray values everywhere. Physics doesn't matter in physically based rendering. Lol.
neither of these statements are correct. In order to explain why, I will have to dig a little bit into the theory of it all, but I will try to keep it brief and leave the more nitty-gritty stuff for a more in-depth tutorial later down the road. The fundamentals of 3D materials are based on physics and are separated into two simplified reflection groups. The first being F0, or diffuse reflections, which result from a combined set of phenomena that occurs at an opaque surface when light refracts. The second is F90, or specular reflections, being light that didn't refract and reflected off the surface instead of entering it. These terms may sound familiar to you, and you may associate them with the specular workflow rather than the metalness workflow. Both workflows do in fact share these fundamentals, and they both do the same thing at the core. What differentiates them is how you assign these values, what control you have over them, and the potential output quality. In the traditional specular system, you have one input for each of these phenomena, representing reflected light as color and percentage. You add all your diffuse reflections into your diffuse input, all your specular reflections into your specular input, and the combined behavior of both inputs equals the result. Simple. The metalness system has opted for another approach, basing the inputs on material behavior rather than splitting them by reflection types, exploiting that conductors, or metals, behave differently than dielectrics, or non-metals. This approach may appear more intuitive on a surface level to some, but is objectively more convoluted in practice and comes with some negative side effects as a result. In this setup, you add your dielectric diffuse reflections and your metal specular reflections into the same input, usually called base color, and sometimes incorrectly referred to as albedo. The specular amount and color of dielectrics will be forced by the system, or is controlled by an external controller. This will depend on what system or engine you use. An input called metalness determines what part of your base color should be used as either dielectric diffuse or metallic specular. 1, or white, meaning metallic specular, and 0, or black, meaning dielectric diffuse. This odd separation of controls can lead to very funky results if used improperly, and can even invert their intended function, a topic I may delve deeper into in the future.
So, metal on, metal off, right?
No. While the fundamental idea is accurate, neither texture maps nor screens have anywhere near the fidelity of reality. Each pixel of a texture map is an average of every molecule contained in whatever surface area that pixel represents, rendering that statement flawed. You can think of the atomic structure of a corroded iron plate as a raster, much like an old newspaper print. What appears as a gradient at the resolution of a human eye is in reality a gradual decrease in the point density of rust versus iron molecules. If we take this grid of 4x4 pixels, representing an alternating pattern of metallic versus dielectric molecules in a metalness system, then downscale them to a single pixel, representing our available resolution, we end up with 50% gray. This is in fact the correct value to represent this area. The same of course goes to the gradient example. As soon as you don't have enough resolution to represent all existing points, the rounded values result in grays. What this means in practice is that as long as your texture maps sport lower than molecular resolution, gray values at transition points are inevitable if you want to accurately represent reality. Each individual material layer should however be considered either on or off. As in, the base layer is iron, which is a metal, and therefore would be white. The upper layer is rust, which is a dielectric, and therefore would be black. Gray values should never be used to represent a single opaque material, but are expected at points where a metal transitions into a dielectric.
Alright, so will these fancy accurate gradients look any good then?
No, they won't. The metalness system is infamously bad at handling transitional values, as in gray values in the metalness input. Any transition point will be stuck between the two interpretations of the base color input plus whatever type of dielectric specular controller is present. This results in an inaccurate mix between the two states and an end result not even a mother could love. Going the other way, by trying to avoid gradients altogether, will instead result in a jaggy, unnatural, and unpleasant look that is a downgrade rather than an improvement. On top of that, the gradient problem will return if any texture filtering is applied by the engine, which it will be, unless you manually disable it, which will lead to a sharp pixel art look instead.
Both options sound like crap. How do we fix it then?
When it comes down to it, there are two real solutions to this problem. The first is using a rendering solution that allows for multiple material layers. The Metalness BRDF was originally designed for VFX, where working with multiple layers is standard. If you stack separate metallic and dielectric layers on top of each other rather than mush them all down into the same texture maps, you avoid the problem. The issue is, of course, that most texturing tools aren't designed around working this way, and that most game engines don't currently support multiple material layers. The second way is to simply ditch the Metalness system altogether and opt for the specular system instead. It never had this problem in the first place, as each pixel in each input will simply have whatever value you assign to it, making any material transition gradients render flawlessly and as intended, with or without multiple material layers. That would be it for now. Special thanks to Linus Asplund and Henry Lipponen for portraying the role of ignorant artist stereotypes.
As long as it looks good.
I make everything I perceive as white brighter than snow.
That's fucking terrible.